Hi, I'm Michelle Chalfant, psychotherapist, holistic life coach, and human just like you, learning to navigate life's challenges. With over 25 years experience, I teach people how to get healthy using the adult chair model. The adult chair model is where simple psychology meets grounded spirituality, and it teaches us how to become healthy adults. From anxiety and depression to codependency and relationship issues, you can use the adult chair for just about anything. Each week, I share practical tips, tools, and advice from myself and a wide range of experts on how to get unstuck, how to live authentically, and how to truly love yourself, all while sitting in your adult chair. Welcome to the Adult Chair Podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Adult Chair Podcast. I am Michelle Chalfant, here with you in week 2 of our summer series. Yes, we are in week 2 of July, and I hope you all had a wonderful 4th of July last week. I had a phenomenal time at the beach. I was down in Isle of Palms, the beaches of Charleston, South Carolina, and just had another phenomenal time. I think you guys know, if you've heard me at all of this show, that's one of my favorite places to go. My sister actually had a friend that came in from high school with her family they were down in Charleston, but my sister wanted to go down and see her, so she ended up getting a condo and invited me to come along, and we worked most of the day during the week, but then by the late afternoon or mid-afternoon, we were able to head out to the beach and have a blast. I did a lot of good writing. I shared with you guys last week that I am writing another book, which is oh my gosh, it's so much fun, and it's just coming right through me. I'm so excited about this next book. So I got a lot of great writing done last week. Yeah, I'm really, really excited. Really excited about that book. But anyway, so today and we have another summer series episode. This is with the lovely Laura McKowen. She is a not only phenomenal author, but really, gosh, we had a great conversation. She has gone through her own sobriety, but wow, we had such a great conversation around her journey. This was one of my favorite shows as well. Yeah, I can't wait to hear what you guys think about it. So here we go with the lovely Laura McKowen. Today on the show, we are talking about sobriety. And I got to tell you, I love when people come on and they are willing to be vulnerable and truly share their story about where they were, where they are today. It is just so authentic. I love this. And today's guest, Laura McKowen, does just that. She shares her story today of how she became sober, why she became sober, and what she discovered after she became sober. We go over so many incredible things during this show. And, we talked a lot about the drinking culture and how it normalizes excessive drinking. We busted some health myths around drinking. And I love this. She went through the process of getting sober, and she was scared of what it would mean for her life. And it ended up unlocking everything she ever wanted. So, and lastly, we also talked about how to develop a healthier relationship with alcohol, whether you choose to cut it out completely or enjoy it in moderation. So this show is not about telling you to stop drinking. It's more about raising awareness around alcohol, sobriety, and maybe your drinking habits. So take a look at that. And I have to say, I'm thinking back to my private practice in Nashville. I remember having some clients that would come in and they'd plunk down in my chair and say, I need some help. I'm drinking too much. So just having that awareness alone is phenomenal. Like being able to check yourself is what this is all about. It's about raising awareness around yourself. What are you using to numb out? Are you using too much alcohol? Anyway, Laura gets into all of this and more in today's show. It's a really, really great show, and I look forward to hearing from you all and love hearing from you on how you like the show. So, of course, hit me up on social media, but also head on over to wherever you listen to the show because I do read those comments. Yeah, head over to Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to the show. Thank you for hitting me up with these comments, because I like to hear the feedback on all the shows. As you are discovering more about yourself, I want to remind you that the root of who we are has to do with our self-worth. So whether you're drinking too much, binging out on Netflix, feeling numb, not sure what's going on in your life, it boils down to self-worth. What's going on inside of you? How worthy do you feel? I'm really passionate about this topic, and this is why I've created for you my self-worth bundle. It has 4 meditations that take you on a deep dive into your true self, help you to find your power, and more. I also created journaling prompts that go with the meditations. So check it out over at theadultchair.com/worthy to learn more and to step more into your self-worth and grow self-worth. That's theadultchair.com/worthy. All right, let me tell you a little bit more about Laura McKowen. She's the best-selling author of We Are the Luckiest, The Surprising Magic of a Sober Life, and founder of the Luckiest Club, which is an international sobriety support community. Laura has been published in the New York Times, and her work has been featured in The Atlantic, The Wall Street Journal, The Today Show, and more. Her second book, Push Off From Here, 9 Essential Truths to Get You Through Sobriety and Everything Else, releases on March 7th. So it is with great pleasure that I welcome to the show today, Laura McKowen. So welcome to the Adult Chair podcast,
Thank
Laura
you.
McKowen. It's so nice to have you.
You too. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I was telling you that I found you years ago. I don't remember how or what. I think it was online. I think it was on social somewhere, but it's really
Probably.
just
Chances are it was
probably.
online.
I think it was a time when you were going through a lot, maybe when your first book came out, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Possible.
yeah, I was also sharing with you before we started that I've been wanting to have someone on for many years to really talk about addiction, but specifically sobriety. So I'm glad to have you on since
I'm happy to be that person.
Yeah. So why don't you tell everybody a little bit about who you are? And I'd love if you wouldn't mind to share your story.
Sure. So I am an author. I'll say I have not. Who I am today is a little bit different than who I was about a decade ago. I have had a career change. I'm one of those people who switched careers a little, I wouldn't say late in life, but late 30s, early 40s. I started writing, and I've had podcasts, and I run a business called The Luckiest Club, which is a sobriety support community that provides, it's global. So we started that in 2020. But prior to that, I was in advertising and marketing and had a whole career in that. So my story, though, of getting sober, I will give a pretty condensed version because, of course, there's a much longer version. And it's I have, that's what my first book is. We Are the Luckiest is really my sobriety memoir. But I, like many people, grew up in a home where drinking was very normalized. I thought that's what all adults did. My family owned a restaurant. It was there was a lot of alcohol all the time. And I didn't really think anything of it other than it was this foregone conclusion that, of course, I was going to drink when I could. And I started in high school, but didn't really I played sports. So I wasn't one of those people who, when they had their first drink, the lights went on and I was off. It was a slower build. I did drink problematically, I would say, from the beginning. I would black out a lot. I always wanted to drink to obliterate myself, not just it wasn't a relaxed drinking situation, although there were times where I could absolutely take it and leave it. And I could fool myself into thinking that I was fine and I looked fine from the outside, unless you got really close. And then there were, occasional scary moments that grew more frequent over time where I would black out. I would drive drunk. I would, put myself in bad situations. So went to a very heavy drinking college, moved to Boston. I grew up in Colorado. I moved to Boston right after I graduated from college and found people who drank like I did. I worked in marketing and advertising, and it wasn't hard to find people who drank like I did because they were all around me, and
yeah.
I kind of thought that college would be this big drinking scene, which it was. And then when I, got out of it and became an adult, that people would slow down, and it wasn't the case. People drank more. I mean, we went out all the time, and I knew that I liked to drink a little too much. I loved it a little too much. I had this like scratching, gnawing thing in me. About how I drank and how much I looked forward to it and how anxious I felt without it or before I could get that drink. But again, it was so normalized and so much a part of the lives of everyone that I was around that and I looked fine. I got promotions. I was very functional, at least externally. And then a big shift happened when I got married. And I, this gets into all kinds of relationship and attachment stuff, but I had this like panic moment when I got married and questioned what I was doing and if I wanted to be married. And I started drinking a lot at that. And acting out outside the marriage and drinking more, and this like perpetual cycle of shame and lying and all of that started to build. And then I became a mother, and that really changed things because I always say like the alcohol stopped working the same way once I became a mom. Whereas before I would be able to find some amount of relief in it. Anxiety has always been a huge thing for me. And I would, the alcohol helped that for a long time, but then it started to backfire. And I felt that most acutely when I became a mom. And it was like pouring water on a rock. Like I just didn't touch my anxiety anymore. And so I drank more. And and you can't function the same way when you're a parent, when you're especially a new parent. So I had all the hormonal things going on, and I was overtired, and my marriage was not going well, and it got really bad. My marriage split up. At this point, I was still accelerating in my career, but just about everything else was falling apart. My marriage, we separated in 2012 when my daughter was 3. And between 2012 and 2013, that's where the real bottoms came. And I had many. I had unwanted pregnancies. There were countless things in hindsight, looking back, that were really horrific and not normal at all. But I was able to normalize them. And between 2012 and 2013, I got a DUI. I left my daughter in a hotel room overnight at my brother's wedding because I was blackout drunk. And that was the moment that, because it was public, my family was there, they knew, and because it was my daughter, and I still had this delusion that nothing bad would happen to her, that there was no way I was going to allow her to be in danger. I wouldn't hurt her. And I did put her in danger. And so it forced me to, that's when I started to go to 12-step meetings. I started to try to get sober. Very reluctantly. I still didn't want to get sober. I still thought it was the end of the world. And it felt like that for a good year. I tried from 2013 to 2014, put together some time in sobriety, and then I would drink again and then go back. And it's a process, as anyone will tell you, to get sober. It's very rare that someone just decides to stop and then it's over. So that year was terrifying and horrifying and awful and scary. And also the lights started to come on and I started to write a lot, and I started to get this fire in me about what this thing was, about alcohol culture, and the fact that we're all sort of lying about what's going on. And I was this one that was labeled with a problem, right? But everyone around me used alcohol, and most people used it in very unhealthy ways. And so I started to write, and just sort of write for myself, really, to figure out what was going on with me. I started to write on a blog. I started to get pieces published. I started a podcast in 2015, and I started talking about this stuff openly, which at that, like today, people talk about it a lot more openly. But in 2015, almost 10 years ago, that was not the case. Nobody was talking openly about sobriety, especially outside of a 12-step framework, right? And so I started to create this, I guess, presence. And I had always wanted to be a writer. Always. I thought it was the older I got, the further away I thought that dream was. And it seemed like there was no way that was ever going to happen. And then I started to really chase that. And eventually in 2016, I quit my career. I started to work towards actually writing a book and doing other things. And now I'm 8.5 years sober, and it's a whole different life. But I would say the summary of my story is like many other people. I looked fine, almost to a scary degree. I seemed fine. I looked fine. I was not fine. It got really bad, and I was ashamed. I was afraid of what it would mean to not drink. I didn't think I would ever be loved again. I didn't think I would ever have fun again. I thought I would be boring. I thought it was the end of everything, and it wasn't. It was absolutely the beginning of everything that I actually wanted. But it was a long process.
Wow. Thank you. I really appreciate how brave you are, but your vulnerability and all the details that you just gave. I really, really want to thank you, and congratulations on 8.5 years sober too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
That's quite an accomplishment.
Yeah. It's strange to say out loud.
Yeah. I am really impressed with you, all of this. You said a lot of important things, and I actually wrote them down because they're so good. And it's so true that when you said a couple of things about how normalized drinking it is, and you thought, well, you go to college and everyone gets wasted. That's just what most people do. Right. And then, or drink, use the word drinking. I'm going to say get wasted.
Well, yeah, both. Yes.
That's just what you do. And you're like, I went to a college that, there's a lot of whatever you said, drinking, of like, in what college it doesn't have a lot of drinking.
I know. Right.
And then you went to work, and it was even more than college, because it's the world. Is it the world we live in, or the United States, do you think? I don't want to say that it's the whole world. What is your
it's the world in part. I mean, in certain parts. I think the United States has a specific confluence of factors that make it I don't want to say more challenging, but specifically challenging.
It's interesting, as you say, that we had a foreign exchange student from Austria who was he was a wonderful, he still is, he is a wonderful kid. But he came to us when my younger son was in 10th grade, and he also was in 10th grade. So that was like 16 years old. And I remember sitting down and talking with him, and I was like, how does this, there was so many times I'd ask him, how does this compare to Austria? And he said, the kids here are really unaware of things like politics and world affairs, but because they're focusing so much of everything on going out and partying. I was like, so true. Like, I'm like, that is scary and very true. In fact, the laugh thing, he was in all honors classes and he was like fit in with all the cool kids. He was one of those kids, but he says, just, it's really strange how much drinking happens here. And I think that's, and I have people in my family and some friends and their kids just went off to college and they're all fresh. Some of the kids are freshmen now. And they were saying, I'm so worried because they're going to be drinking so much. I'm like, and they will. And it's so sad that it's that normalized. But you said even graduating, it's normalized. And that's our society, it seems like. It's how the world is, and I talk to people now, and I really don't drink. I don't have a problem, I would say, with alcohol, if that's appropriate to say. I hope it didn't offend you by saying that. No, I don't know if that's fine. But no, I will tell you, in college, I did. What your story was very similar to mine. In fact, my roommate and I drank 6 nights a week in undergrad, and we took Friday nights off. And we blacked out many
Friday nights off.
It was Friday nights. We didn't need happy hour. That was our night to stay in and watch movies because we needed a break. But we drank a lot in college. Yeah. And blacking out was quite a normal occurrence. And it was funny. Like, it was funny. I still remember like going to the grocery store the next day and having people come up to us and be like, hey, you guys were so funny last night. And we'd walk away and we'd be like, who the hell was that? I don't remember you, and it was funny. Like, it was funny. And then it wasn't like, then again, like you, like 20 years old, graduated, went off, and I'm like, wow, people are still doing this. Yeah. I don't even know what my question is. I'm sitting here. I'm like, just my brain is exploding because I'm like, you're so right. And I'm also thinking, and I'm worried. Like, I'm worried because this is the at least in the United States, this is how we live. Like, where is the hope? And I'm hoping that you telling your story, that people actually break out of this and it wakes some people up, because it is a problem. And for me, I realized I don't really like drinking. And then I was told I had a liver issue. They said, please don't drink. I was like, thank God. Because I realized in my mid-20s, I'm like, I really don't like what I'm doing. So I just sort of stopped, and I might have like a drink or two a year, and I drink half of it just because I'm in a crowd of people. Otherwise, I don't really drink. But I find now people say to me, oh, you had a bad day? Come on over for a glass of wine. I'm like, I don't want a glass of wine. I would like to come talk to you about my emotions, though. And that's, speaking of that, I don't think people do that well. So I want to hear your take on what the heck is going on. What is going on with all this drinking?
Yeah. Well, you're right that it is absolutely a thing. It has been a thing for a long time. It got worse for women, especially about 15 years ago. There's an amazing book called Drink by Ann Dowsett Johnston, who really talks about what she called the pinking of the alcohol industry. The big alcohol identified mothers and women as a new market. And, now we've got mommy wine culture and
totally
rosé everywhere. And
you can't even go to an art. Now there's art and wine. I'm like, can't we have art?
Or wellness and wine, yoga studios and wine and all that. Yeah. So it is. And the result is women are dying more. They're drinking more, they're dying more, they're having, more hospitalizations because of drinking. Alcohol use disorder in the population of women 34 to 65 is up like 87% over the past 10 years. So there's all these harrowing factors that are happening and are very real. And there's so many pieces to it too. Like, it's not that people are just stupid. And, we have been brainwashed to think that this is a very benign substance, not even benign, that it's to be celebrated and prized, and that it's what belongs in a good life. It's what belongs in every celebration. That celebrations are not complete unless they are punctuated by alcohol. Milestones aren't complete. This is how you relieve stress. This is how you relax. This is how you flirt. This is how you connect with your friends. The list goes on and on and on. And this is just, people don't even, they think that problematic drinking only belongs to someone who is, called an alcoholic, which that word has been replaced. I think in 2016 or 13, it got replaced by alcohol use disorder, which is more accurate because it's a spectrum, right? And there's a very wide spectrum of what one could call problematic drinking. And so what I'm leading to is, I have seen personally in the past 10 years since I've been talking about this, a big shift. You said, where's the hope? There's a shift that's starting to happen. A lot more people are talking about drinking, not drinking, and it's not this like anathema conversation that nobody is allowed to have, this taboo thing. The last thing my friends would ever bring up back when I got sober is alcohol. Like, no one wanted to touch it. We would talk about everything, but we do not want to talk about the potential for, about what alcohol is doing to us, because it was so protected.
Yeah.
Right. We need to keep this thing. That's different now. There's a lot more books, memoirs that have come out. There's a lot of podcasts. Millennials are drinking more. That is true. It's heavily researched, and their attitudes towards alcohol are different. That's good news. There's also the fact that it's coming out. The Lancet put out a report in 2017 that said there is no safe amount of alcohol. And that was the first time that was ever said, because it's always been, you can do it in moderation, and in moderation, it's even it's healthy. It's healthy for your heart. My grandma always used to say, oh yes, have a glass of red wine. It's healthy for your heart. And now they're saying, not only is there no safe amount, really freaking bad for you.
Yeah.
So there is hope. I think it's a ship that is turning very slowly, but it is turning. And I think that, it's a lot of, if you look at the way people talk about mental health, for example, which you probably are very aware of, even 15, 20 years ago, nobody would talk about depression, anxiety. Now it's like a regular part. I have a 14-year-old daughter. It's a regular part of her and her friends, like conversations and vernaculars that are talking about their mental health,
which is phenomenal.
Yeah. So finally. I think there is hope. There is hope. And I think I do believe that. I think women, there are also, if anyone's here listening and thinking like there's this scratching at you, like you might, want to evaluate your relationship with alcohol. There's also so much more out there now about, in terms of support. It was for so long just AA. That was where you went if you had a problem. And I think AA is wonderful. I think the 12 steps are beautiful, but that isn't a room that everyone wants to walk in or would identify. And now people can get sober just because they don't want, because they want to feel better, because they want to improve their life, because they don't like you. They're like, alcohol just doesn't work for me. And it doesn't have to be a thing.
Right. But it's, I find it's harder for other people than me. It's almost like other people are uncomfortable. And I'm not,
of course.
It's like, what do you mean you're not going to drink? I remember I was a raw vegan, like almost 20 years ago. And I obviously wasn't drinking alcohol. And I would go, I'd go to whatever holiday things or over to friends' houses. And they were like, well, you're not drinking anything. I'm like, no, I'm fine though. Like, I'm fine. Like, I still want to hang out. And they were like,
well, it holds up a mirror.
It really does. Yeah. People don't like that. But speaking of it being not healthy, and again, I don't want this show to be about like, if you're drinking, you need to stop. That's not what the show is about today. I'm hoping today to really educate people and raise their awareness around sobriety and how it can be. So I want to shift in that direction too.
Great.
But I just have to make this comment. So I had this some blood work done, and it was like my phase 2 liver detox doesn't function as well as it could. I just was born in that way. So, and the person I was working with said, you just really want to watch that alcohol. I'm like, well, certainly I can have like a margarita if I go on vacation or something. And I did some research. I was trying to find what alcohol was healthy. And not only is it not healthy, I could not find, and I Googled for like 30 minutes or an hour, like there's got to be something. And it was like zero. Everything I kept pulling up was, it's a poison. It's a poison. It's a poison. It's poisonous. And but people think the red wine and the resveratrol and the whole thing. I'm like, wow, it was fascinating to me. I'm like, wow, it really is poison to our systems.
Yeah.
And I wonder, right? And what?
No, it's true. And it's, it's not like unhealthy in the way that, carbs are unhealthy, or like,
it's
eating gluten can be unhealthy even for people that don't have,
right.
celiac. It's like, it's an actual neurotoxin. And this it's not a morality statement to say, it's just not, it's really damaging. One of the best podcasts and resources on this, if you're curious, is Andrew Huberman did a podcast about the effects of alcohol.
Yeah.
He is a scientist, and he did it's like a 3-hour episode. And even he says in it, first of all, he apologizes the whole time because he's like, I'm bursting people's bubbles. So there's that. He even acknowledges the sort of cultural thing he's pushing against, but also that he was shocked himself as a scientist when he dug into the literature. And what that tells me is that this stuff has been buried. I mean, that's not a secret. It's not a secret that this stuff has been buried and twisted and, presented in a very different way for the purposes of big alcohol for a long time. So anyone who's interested in like, okay, why is it bad? What does it actually do to you? It also, I think this is helpful because I didn't realize, for example, that alcohol was making my anxiety way worse. And I didn't realize that until I did. And then having done research, I realized like there's an actual biological component to that. It wasn't just in my head. I thought it made my anxiety worse because I was ashamed of the things I did. No, it actually physiologically triggers your anxiety and makes it worse. It jacks up your sleep, which throws everything off. And so, and it's a depressant. So anyway, if people are curious about what it actually does and why we're saying this, I highly recommend that episode.
He's one of my favorites. Like Andrew,
he's great.
Huberman, he's my man. And I heard that episode and I was in shock listening to it as well. I was like, whoa. But how about if someone's listening to the show right now and they're like, I'm fine. I just have, let's say, a glass on the weekend. That's okay. Great. What about someone that's listening going, uh-oh, that sounds a little bit like me? What would be something you could say to them? Like, oh, her story sounds a little bit too close to home, or the people that are saying like, and I remember having clients like this, they'd come in and they'd say, okay, I need your help. And I'd say, well, what's going on? Well, instead of drinking 1 glass of wine when I get home, I'm up to 3 and 4. Something's going on. I'm like, phenomenal awareness right there. Like, excellent. So if you want to drink 1 a day, great. But if you notice that tell us what we need to look out for. How do we know that we might be someone that has a problem with alcohol?
Well, the simplest thing to do is to try to stop. Don't drink for 30 days and see what happens. See how you feel. See if it's challenging. See what comes up for you. And if it's literally there's no change, you don't even notice it, no big deal. Okay, you can go back to whatever you were doing. But most people find when they try to stop that a lot of stuff comes up and it's hard. it's a lot harder than they thought.
Yeah.
So that's a good, and what I want to say also is it's not your fault. Like, this is a highly addictive substance. It's not because you can't handle it, which is what we're told, that the problem is you need more control. You should be able to handle it better. We look around us and see like, oh, all these people are doing great and fine and thriving, and they have these big, wild social lives dripping in alcohol. So I must be doing something wrong. No, it's a highly addictive drug. That's all.
Right. I want to ask you something. So what is life like? So going from that lifestyle of, parties, tons of friends, socials. I know, because I've talked to people about this. They're like, I'm really too afraid because what would I do if I didn't have that? Like, what's on the other side of that?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and that's most, if not all, people's fear, that they won't have a life, that they
lose my
all
friend.
the things I said in the beginning, right?
Yeah.
The the good and the bad news is that life does change, right? But what I have found over time is my relationships are infinitely better and more meaningful. They're not surface relationships that revolve around alcohol anymore. They're actual relationships. Yes, I'm not there were some things that went away, that went by the wayside, some friendships, some situations, or I'm not comfortable in, nor do I want to go to certain social things. And it's not that I'm not comfortable because I'm going to drink. I'm worried about that. It's just not that fun. So our life does change. We end up recreating our life in a way that decenters alcohol. And sometimes that's painful in the beginning. But for me, it's like I said in the start of our conversation, I actually got everything I wanted. And what I wanted was really amazing relationships and connections with people. I wanted to live into this potential that I felt like I had to be a writer, and this potential that I couldn't even really name. It just felt like this big energy inside of me, and I got to like figure that out and live into it. And there's so much meaning in that. I get to not have hangovers ever. I don't forget things. I'm not living in chaos anymore. My life is my life is still my life, but I want it and I love it. And what I mean is my life is still my life. Like, it's still hard. Life remains life, but I am able to walk around with a lot of integrity, which is huge. I never had that. I was always, when you are drinking, even a little more than you want to, it keeps you from facing the truth of whatever that is.
Yeah.
The truth about your marriage, the truth about your job, the truth about ways that you're parenting that you don't like but don't know how to change, the truth about your kids and what they might need, the truth about your family, whatever it is. Alcohol provides a really great shield to just sort of skim across the top of life.
Instead of
to
being fully into life, you're saying.
yeah,
Yeah.
and a
Fully
shield,
engaging. Yeah.
yeah, a shield to just buffer you from what feels very painful and scary. But when you continually don't look at those things and don't face those things, there's a huge disconnect in your life, and you know it and you feel it.
Okay, wait. I want to ask you a question around that. You said a huge disconnect in your life. And I'm wondering, you think about children of today as they grow up. And one thing that I'm very passionate about, and I was telling you earlier, I have a coaching program, and some of my coaches, thank God, I'm passionate about this, helping get these coaches into schools to help children learn how to feel their emotions, to help children learn how to embody, like get in your body and feel what's going on, and give them coping strategies for when they're in emotional pain, when their parents, God forbid, have a divorce or go through a divorce, or someone dies in their family. I realize I didn't really learn that growing up. So, of course, we want to reach for a coping agent, whether it be food, or in my case, I used a lot of alcohol for that reason. I was in a lot of emotional pain. I know that's exactly why I reached for alcohol. And I was raised in a household like you, where growing up, happy hour, my dad would come home from work and pour a bourbon. My mother would have a glass of wine. And in the summers, we all lived at a lake house at my grandmother's, and they had parties all the time. And I remember having the thought, well, I remember having the thought, I was looking at my father and I said, oh, let me taste that. And he'd give me a sip and I'm like, ugh, tastes gross. And I remember thinking, I know that someday I'm going to have to drink that when I come home, because that's what people do. Like, it was like, that's what it was like normalized. But I realized too, because I've worked with so many people over the years, over 25 years, we don't feel our emotions well, and we don't know how to cope with our pain and our suffering. So again, I'm making a very broad guess here because I don't know, but I would wonder that if we were able to do that better, would it help us maybe not to reach for
Totally
the alcohol?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's such a quick and normalized thing.
Yep.
Versus like going to a restaurant and, shooting up heroin. Everyone at the table is going to do it with you. Let's get a bottle of wine. Let's get 2 bottles of wine. So it's like, yep,
Right.
good. I'm going to tap down that emotion. So I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, it's of course. And that's a part of the reason why when people get sober, it doesn't feel better at first. It feels terrible because you have all these feelings that you have been suppressing and drowning and numbing out for so long show up, like tap, tap, tap.
Right.
Hey, we need to be dealt and felt, and it's often decades for people of things that they have bypassed or ignored. And we don't get away with that. We don't get away with it in any way, no matter if it's alcohol or, whatever we use. My friend, she's also an author, Veronica Valley, says, when we are drinking, we outsource our emotions and our ability to process emotions to alcohol. Like, we outsource that. And our coping. And so when we remove the alcohol, we're left with ourselves, and we don't have those skills. We don't have those tools. Most of us don't anyway. And so we have to learn them, and they can be learned. I don't have you asked what it's like now. I have all the emotions and all the fun ones and the not fun ones, but I've learned that none of those are going to kill me. They don't even last that long.
No.
And it just never worked. We don't get away with not feeling things. It goes somewhere, right? And it usually transmutes into something dark. And so there's no way around feeling. There's no way around it.
Yeah. If you take your foot off the gas and stop drinking or stop whatever, I don't care if it's eating, shopping, sex, whatever it is, those emotions are going to be there. But the thing is having a range of emotion is part of our beautiful human experience. And unfortunately, if we're not taught as children what to do with these emotions, then yeah, as adults, we look for numbing agents. So it would be safe to assume then if we were to drink less, we're going to have to look into some personal work, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it just goes hand in hand.
I know. And that's another thing that my friend Veronica Valley says is like, this is work. The work that we end up doing in sobriety is work that everyone has to do. It's just that when you have an addiction, you're forced. You have an urgency about it because you can't afford to be unwell. And that's not just people with an addiction. That's people that get slammed up against grief so hard that they can't, they can't just shove it down and power through. It applies to things like divorce, or, there are some things that force us against the wall. Right. And we fight like hell to avoid those. But there are always invitations. And that's why people say this is sobriety is the best gift I've ever had. And I will say it. I will always say it. And I heard people say that when my addiction rather is the best gift I've ever been given. I heard people say that in the beginning and I wanted to like poke them in the eyes because
I'm sure.
No, but it's absolutely true. It's totally true. This is work everyone has to do at some point.
Yeah. Well, hopefully. Yeah. I think everyone needs to look inside. I mean, this is one thing I'm so passionate about is giving people the skills and the tools in order to feel their emotions and do that personal work because we weren't taught how. So anyway,
and then the thing that happens when we don't is we just pass it on.
Exactly. We don't want to do that. We don't want to pass it down the lineage. So it is so important that we do this. But I have a quote I'd like to quote you.
Oh, sure.
It's so good. The opposite. Oh, no, sorry. I don't know where this came from. The opposite of addiction isn't
Johann Hari.
Yeah, yes, that's who it is. I see that now. The opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, it's connection.
Mm-hmm.
I love it.
Yeah, I know. It's great. We use it a lot for the Luckiest Club. It's sort of like
Tell me about that though. Like you're saying deep connection in relationships. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Well, I don't want to take his words. This is from Johann Hari. He has a great TED Talk about it. If you just Googled that phrase, the opposite of sobriety is not addiction, but connection. Or no, the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, but connection. But what is meant by that, in my experience of that, is we are social animals. We are not made to do this life alone. We can't do it alone.
Yeah.
And shame is so much a part of the pain that we feel when we believe we are not good enough for connection, when we believe we're too damaged or bad or gross or broken to be deserving of connection. And shame disconnects us from our humanity and from the humanity in other people. And addiction especially is incredibly isolating. You believe you are the worst. You are often told you're the worst. You do things that make sense to nobody. You have a lot of secrets. Brene Brown has a great quote that said, if you shame needs 3 things to grow out of control in your life: silence, secrecy, and judgment.
Ooh,
and in addiction, you have all 3 of those, like in spades: silence, secrecy, judgment. And it doesn't only apply to addiction, of course. A lot of us are walking around with silence, meaning we don't talk about this. Nobody talks about this. Like a lot of the homes we grew up in, we don't talk about that, or we don't talk about this. That is off the table. We're going to pretend like this isn't happening. So silence. Secrecy is I keep secrets. No one knows what I actually feel or think or am doing. And judgment, feeling the judgment from others, or judging ourselves, which we are great at. Those three things are rampant when you are in an addiction, and they kill you. Shame is the killer. I thought I would never get out of it. I thought I would never tell people what was actually going on with me. I had so many lies and so many versions of myself going on. And I thought there was just no way out of that, that I would just live that way until I died. And the not drinking wasn't the cure for that. The not drinking was necessary. I had to remove that, but it was actually connecting with other people in a meaningful way and healing in relationship with people that allowed me to heal, and hearing other people say the unspeakable things before I could, whether it was in, 12-step meetings or other meetings, or just in conversation with other sober people, knowing that I wasn't alone and that I wasn't the worst, that I was actually not even that unique, that all these things had been done and said and felt before. And that honesty and that connection were what healed me and allowed me to heal, and what sustains me today. That's one of the reasons that in the 9 things that I wrote for this book, it's you can't do it alone. It's one of them. You just can't. It's the worst news for people, but you can't.
Yeah. And I want to transition because I want to talk to you just for a few minutes about this new book you have coming out next week. Push off from here. 9 essential truths to get you through sobriety and everything else. Tell us a little bit about, well, clearly we know what the book is about, but anything else you want to share? What are these 9 essential truths all about?
So when I started writing about what addiction and sobriety, I sometimes had people write me letters and I would respond to them, and it was always like on my blog at the time. And this one woman wrote me, she had a sister who was struggling with drinking, and as her sister, she was very upset and scared, and all the things that one is when someone they love is struggling in addiction. She was mad, she was frightened, she felt helpless. And she asked me, what would you have wanted to hear? I was sober by then when she was asking me, and I wrote her this long response. And then at the end, said, if all that is too much, this is a list of things I would want to hear. And the list was longer than 9 things. It was like 20 or something, but since I wrote that, I pared it down to 9, and I started using those 9 things for myself. I would share them on social media. They became kind of a thing. And I knew that I wanted, when I wrote We Are the Luckiest, my memoir, I knew that I wanted those to be the epigraph to that book. And when the book came out in 2020, I would get all kinds of people, that people were responding to the book, but they were really responding to these 9 things, which were just like this epigraph, the like content right before the book begins. And I would get screenshots of it, and I would do podcast interviews, and they'd only want to talk about the 9 things. And so they were, clearly resonating. They were hitting a nerve, and not just for alcohol addiction or any addiction. There were people who were going through all kinds of things, eating disorders and divorce and grief and parenting and anything that was challenging. And so I started in 2020, when the pandemic hit, I started a sobriety support community, and it's called the Luckiest Club. And I knew when I started that I wanted the 9 things to be kind of like this backbone of the community. And so we say them still today at the end of every meeting. They're sort of like a mission statement of sorts. And as we proceeded into that community and building it, and hearing these 9 things, the members started to ask, like, okay, so, but what does it mean? Like, what does it mean to take responsibility? What does it mean that it's not my fault? What does it mean? And it became clear that I needed to explain them and dive deeper. And I hadn't even done that. I had, like, they're intuitive enough. It's not your fault. It is your responsibility. We generally get that. But what does that actually mean? And how do I practice that or apply it? And so that's what Push Off From Here became, is this exploration of each of those points.
Oh, I love it. Well, I can't wait to read it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh, this was so good. And I want to say this to everyone that's listening, and I think you'll agree that being human is really hard. It's hard.
Yes.
And no shame on anybody listening to this. I wanted to educate people and share your story because it was so powerful. Or it is such a powerful story. So is there anything else, though, that you want to share that you have not already shared with our audience?
I would just say, if you are listening to this and you're feeling like that pull in your gut, like, this might be me. The first thing you can do is tell someone, talk to someone, anyone who you trust, and say, like, I don't know what this means, and I don't know what I'm saying, but that I'm going to do about it yet. But I listened to this podcast and this is what they were saying, and it feels true to me, and I'm scared, or whatever your words are. And if there isn't anyone that you feel like you can tell, write it down. Write down the truth. Start there. And you can burn the page afterwards if you need to, but just start to get it out of your body is the first step. It's normal to be terrified. It's normal to be ashamed. It's normal to be afraid. It's normal to want to totally ignore it. But this is one of those things that only ever gets worse. It doesn't get better. So, and the good thing is, like, there are lots of books. Buy my book, buy any of the other books out there, and you can sort of just absorb and listen and learn in the privacy of your own mind for a while and your own heart, and then decide what you want to do.
Good advice. Thank you for your journey, and thank you for putting your journey out there, and thank you for all that you're doing and all you're offering. And I was thinking, wow, what great timing it was for you to start your online group during the pandemic, because I was reading.
Yeah, well, it was a result of the pandemic. I had no plans to do it. It was just that everything shut down, and I thought, like, shit, people can't go to meetings anymore. Yeah.
But they said people were getting up drinking like early.
Oh yeah.
I mean, the amount of alcohol consumed during the pandemic was out of control. So what timing? That was good. I know it wasn't planned, but nice timing. Thank you for what you're offering as far as support goes. And I'm excited about your next book. And thanks for being on today. This is really great.
Thanks for having me. That was great.
Oh, where would people find you? I forgot.
Just my website, Laura McKowen is my name. And that's a website, and I'm on social media. I'm mostly on Instagram. So just search for me there.
And then we're going to put all this in the show notes, of course. And your book will be on Amazon. Yes.
It'll be everywhere books are sold. So if you want to go to an indie store near you, I always love that. Yes. Amazon. Yes. Anywhere. And it'll be on Audible. I did the narration. So it's all
that's my favorite when the actual author does the narration. That's
great. I agree.
Okay, cool. Well, I am looking forward to this book. So thank you so much.
Thanks.
All right, you guys, I hope that you enjoyed the show. Please let me know how you liked it. I really love hearing from you all. Hit me up on social media or hit me up wherever you listen to the show. So if you are listening to it on Apple or Spotify or Google Play, wherever you are, let me know how you like the show. I love reading your comments. All right, everybody. That's all I've got for you today. Have a beautiful, beautiful week. And do not forget, if you're ready to look deeper into yourself and radically jump on the self-worth journey, head over to theadultchair.com/worthy and get yourself the self-worth self-worth bundle that will help you to start developing and growing your own self-worth. All right, everybody. My love to you all. I will see you seated right here next week in the adult chair.